All right, week 5. This week we're talking about hurricanes Irma and Maria, and we're also looking to look at international disaster management and coordination. So we're getting even on the larger scale this week. So let's look at the review document. Upon completion of this week's assignments, you'll learn about Hurricane Irma and Maria, international disaster management, and also how a country responds to similar disasters. You'll complete a review on how disaster coordination is done across borders and what international organizations help to respond. And also a brief on multiple hurricanes that can be used to improve the disaster response. So once completed, you'll have an understanding of how international disasters are handled and coordinated. You'll also have an understanding of the key players involved in international disaster response and a grasp on response to similar disasters and the compounding factors that make them different. So you'll have a few videos to watch, you'll have a few things to read, and you'll also have some assignments and discussions, which we'll go look at now. So first is a quiz on international disaster management and coordination. See, as we're getting later in the semester, you'll see you only have one attempt now on this quiz. So make sure that you're doing all the readings prior to taking the quiz. Assignment 5.1, how a country handles the same disaster. So 3 separate disasters, Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, were very similar in wind speed, strength, and positions, yet the U.S. responded to each very differently. The compounding issues that arose from each state and territory getting hit by these hurricanes added a different necessity to the response. And this goes back to the whole discussion of no two disasters are the same. So you're going to put yourself in the role of Brock Long, who was the FEMA administrator at the time. Your job is to report to the president on the responses that occurred this year from these 3 dramatic hurricanes. You're going to create a brief that will be delivered to the country's leadership, and this brief will include a short background on each hurricane, the damage incurred in the areas most severely impacted, recovery efforts that are underway and what issues are slowing down the recovery process, and then also what was learned that we are using in future responses. So you can use this link to kind of see how number 4 really takes into place. So how the response to Hurricane Maria compared to Harvey and Irma. So this is just going to be a brief, think of it as, 4 or 5 different paragraphs for each, not for each, 4 or 5 paragraphs altogether. And then you're going to submit that as being the FEMA administrator to the President of the United States, which is cool because that considers me the president. All right, let's move over to the next one. Assignment 5.2 is about international disaster coordination. So building off your discussion assignment in 5.2 and this week's work, you're going to look at Hurricane Maria and Irma and identify the major issues that arose in disaster response for one of the countries impacted, not the U.S. Choose a different country, and how that country handled the response and the international response by other countries and organizations. You're going to answer the following questions in your response. Similar to an after-action report, what went well in this response? What were the major issues? How were those issues addressed? And was the international response helpful or hurtful to the impacted country, and why? So you're going to take a stance on this, whether the international response was helpful or hurtful, and whichever one you choose, make sure to support that reasoning. On the discussion side, 5.1, we're going to look at disasters impacting multiple countries. Right, so Hurricane Irma impacted multiple countries in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, British Virgin Islands, and Cuba. You're going to think about what it takes to respond to a disaster like Hurricane Irma on different levels with different resources available. Cuba has different resources than the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, so you're going to think about how they utilize their resources to respond to a disaster like Hurricane Irma. Talk about the differences in response based on these resources. Think outside the box here, not just about the money each government has. Think about their history, their geographic location, other things that might make them stand out compared to the other areas. 5.2 looks again at international emergency management. So this takes all the challenges identified in the local, state, and federal disaster responses, and it increases the difficulty exponentially because now we're looking at international law, we're looking at different country-specific laws. So when a disaster occurs, that mandates a need for international response, it is because the country cannot support that response needed of a disaster. You're going to think about what challenges a government faces from a local and or federal level when a disaster of such a magnitude occurs, so that international organizations and other countries are providing aid. Outside of the massive coordination effort, what else does this home country have to deal with? How would you recommend dealing with these identified issues? So here you're going to choose a few issues, identify what they are, why they're such big issues, and how you would recommend dealing with these issues. All right, so that's that. You've got a decent amount of reading and materials to watch this week, as you can see here. And then you've got your assignments and your discussions. So we're getting to the end of the semester. Things are going to pick up a little bit next week, and we'll go over that shortly for week 6. All right, take care, everyone.